Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 21st of June 2023, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7RP. Great to see you. On tonight's show, we find out about HamPi and other ham applications for single board computers with Loren KE0HZ. A look back at the Friendly Fox Hunt radio direction finding competition from Monday, and we find out what on earth this is. But I'm afraid we start NARC Live with some very sad news, because our club member Chris G0HZ has just passed away. Chris suffered from pneumonia for several years and COVID has not helped him. I actually, after putting a note in the newsletter to some people to sort of go and see him, as we were asked to by a couple of friends, I went to see him in hospital on Friday afternoon, and he really wasn't very well. So much so, in fact, that we withdrew the notification to some people later on the newsletter queue to go. But I went to see him and sat by his side with Richard, and we talked to him and we talked to each other. And he was conscious, but not very well, really. And he died overnight between Friday and Saturday. Chris was very much into the electronics side of the hobby. He used to love repairing and using particularly the older style equipment. He got into CW, as I found when I phoned some of you at home to give you the news on Saturday. I found out that he only got into CW relatively recently, and yet, as you'll know, he was such a champion of that mode and taught so many people and ran regular nets on the repeater for GB2CW. I think everybody would agree that Chris was always a private person, but he was always very keen to help people, especially in this newfound love of CW. I am in touch with the executor and a couple of close friends who are helping with that process, and I'll bring you details of the funeral as soon as I have them on a newsletter. Chris G0HZ, sadly, truly now silent key. Now, on Monday this week, we had our first direction finding fox hunt of the year. It started, as usual, at Thorpe Recreation Ground at 7:30 on 145.225 megahertz. And the fox, well, we'll tell you where he was located when we go on. But we've made a short film up of some of the pictures that Mark G0LGJ and I took. And let's have a look at that. There were 10 teams, which is really good. There was Bitten with Alec, Peter, Ian and Stephen. Team Lucas with Stuart and Zena. Wrong Direction with Ben, Nev and Rachel. Condor with Mike and Bob. Team Tornado with James, Kevin, James and Lynn. Destruction Crew with Sonny, Paul and Mark. The Summer Wine Team with Bob, Paul and Richard. Team Meandering with Colin and Jenny, and Lost Direction with Richard and Toby. That's them on the screen now. They all met at Thorpe Recreation Ground, and at 7:30 the first transmissions from the Fox started. And if you have never been to this event and you're interested in it, you can make some very simple equipment. I was particularly impressed that couple of people had just literally made, Marie and Steve had just made their equipment. I think they finished it that day. It's a great bit of fun. So the foxes were hidden somewhere in Norfolk on Ordnance Survey map 133, and you can see Bob, Paul and Richard there having a look at their map. There's another Richard there having a look at the map to try and work out where those first bearings were. And this is where the fox was. It was in Church Lane in Brandeston on a sort of concrete pad. And that is the winning team, actually, Team Tornado. They found it in 13.2 miles. So well done to them. That was James M0UKS, Kevin M0UJD, James G7PQF, and Lynn. And of course, thank you very much to the team of Foxes as well who transmitted. And that was Chris, Andy, Laura, and Kim. So I think it would be fair to say that great fun was had by all. 10 teams is a really strong number. In fact, we don't really ask people to pre-register for this, but we only printed 10 sets of envelopes and 10 sets of the instructions and things that you need to have. So it was really great, and I think next time we'll be printing a few more. Now the next Fox Hunt, which is of course for the trophy, that's in July. So you've got a few weeks now. It's not too late to even build equipment. The club has a DF100 kit, which is just £8. That's the main basic electronics that you need. Plus you need a few bits of metal work and a few scraps that you might have around the workshop, to be honest. So if you're interested in that, just drop me a note and I'll send you details of that. And there's of course lots of other ways of doing it. The little kit that we have is very, very simple, but you can use quite extravagant kits using the Doppler system and other things like that. But also it can be much simpler. And in fact, one team, I think, were just using a handheld and using their body as a sort of shield for the direction. So maybe a handheld Yagi antenna. There's lots of ways of doing it, but it is great fun. Thanks to everybody, thanks to the Foxes, and thanks to all those 10 teams who took part. About 30 odd people from the club were involved with that on Monday night. So well done to all of you. Now on to other club news, and I've mentioned it before, and there'll be another time we'll mention it again as well, because it's Barford Radio Rally very shortly now. It's the 2nd of July. Actually, this will be the last time we meet on NARC Live before that, thinking about it. So that's the details, the main details that you need to know. It's on Barford Village Green, which has been there for ages and ages. Tammy and I will be out very, very early putting out some signs from first thing. If you are helping, and we do want some more helpers, by the way, so if you can help us, particularly parking all the cars that tend to turn up all at once, please drop me an email. So the helpers only, people who are working there, if you could arrive about 7:30, and that is 7:30 a.m. And at 8 o'clock we welcome traders, people who are going to sell either outside or inside, and then visitors from the public from 9 o'clock. That just gives us a way of organising everything so we don't get people arriving too early, and it really helps us a lot as well. As you can see on there, there are large outside selling pitches available. You don't need to book them, and it's £8 when I'll come round and collect your money on the day. We do have a few tables inside, however, they're all now sold, I'm afraid. We do have the RSGB. They're coming and bringing a bookstall and a membership stand. And there's also a bring and buy. So if you've only got 1 or 2 pieces of equipment that you want to sell, it's absolutely ideal for that. And there's a few other traders indoors as well. Lots of traders outside as well. We have our NARC stand outside where Jim and Roger will be showing CW. There'll be a raffle. I think Tammy's going to be on the NARC stand for some of the time. I'll be sort of floating around between different parking up traders and parking up visitors as well, and you'll be able to collect badges and join the club and all sorts of things like that. The raffle will be drawn at midday on Sunday. You don't have to be there for the raffle, but all proceeds will be to the club's charity, or charities as they are this year, which is FAB and Diabetes UK. So the entry fee is £2.50. Under 16s are free. We'd love to see young people there as well. And as I said, the stand fee at £8, that also includes the entry for 2 people. So you see it's not a very expensive event. The usual contact is for me, really. I'm the main organiser of it. Between Mark Taylor and I, Mark does all of the catering, and there's, of course, hot and cold drinks and eats and bacon rolls and things inside as well. But for any other queries about the event, please drop me a line to the usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com. So it's Sunday, the 2nd of July, not long now. And if you can help, please drop me a line as well. Now, we're also pleased to announce another NARC event, a summer event that we've done for many, many years, and it is Radio by the Seaside. Here's a slide to tell you all about it, and some pictures from last year, that is. It's on Sunday, the 9th of July, so just the Sunday after Barford. It's at West Runton, near the cafe. There's a big car park there on the cliffs on Water Lane. And it starts around about 10 o'clock. But to be honest, you can arrive exactly whenever you want. As long as the car park is open, you're welcome to set up, to arrive. If you let the person know on the gate who's taking the money, then they'll tell you to where all the club members are meeting. You can bring radios, you don't have to bring radios, but if you do, we just ask that you run relatively low powers so that nobody gets swamped and everybody can have a go. So it's a sort of QRP event really if you're going to run some radio. And a lot of people bring kite antennas and all that sort of thing. It's a great bit of fun, a lovely chance to bring everybody as well. There's no cost for it other than what you're going to pay for on the car park. And of course we invite lots of friends, family and everybody to come and join us for that. So that's Sunday the 9th of July for Radio by the Seaside. Finally, for club news, just to remind you what we've been putting on the newsletter for a couple of weeks, and that is that the club are selling a few pieces of equipment, what we call our major assets. There's an ICOM IC7100 all band, all mode rig, pretty much does every band, 4 metres, 6 metres, 2, the lot, and HF of course, and D-Star as well. There's a Ranger 811H PA amplifier and the Kenwood R5000 receiver. Now we want, because they're club assets, they're owned by the club, and we feel we should offer them to club members first. We're not setting exact prices for them. We have ideas for reserves, and that's not because we're trying to be greedy, but we're realistic. We don't expect you to pay the same amount that you might pay from one of the major retailers because they're going to give a guarantee and things with it. But you will be able to check the equipment out. You'll even be able to test it if you want to, and we're giving it to the first opportunity to club members before we offer it on the open market and at Barford as well. So next Wednesday, the 28th of June, when we're meeting at CNS, you'll be able to inspect all these 3 bits of equipment and check them over for yourself. And if you want to make a bid, you'll need to do it by 9 o'clock at the latest on that night. 9 o'clock latest. You can do it by email in advance if you wish, subject to you seeing it and being happy with it. As I said, 9 o'clock then is when we'll open any envelopes with sealed bids in them. And we have had a couple of offers already for a couple of bits of equipment as well, by the way. Now, members news. And Steve, G3EVA, writes to tell us that last Monday, Steve, G3EVA's dog Alfie, was enrolled as the official mascot and assistance dog for the Fab Club, which of course is one of this year's club's charities. And Merv is one of their members as well. Steve goes and entertains them, and I think his dog gives as much entertainment as well, don't you, Tammy?
I think he does.
Alfie. As you can see from these pictures, Alfie takes his role very seriously, and you can see him meeting and greeting some of his many fans. And I think we've got a little video, haven't we?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we didn't actually see Steve perform. I guess we'd have trouble anyway broadcasting any music
It was
and
about
stuff
Alfie.
like that. Well, it was about Alfie. You're right. You're quite right as well. Anyway, thank you very much for sending us that video, Steve, and well done to Alfie for making it their official mascot. And of course, that is one of the charities that the club will be supporting. And as I mentioned earlier, at Barford Radio Rally, that's one of the major places that we raise money for those charities, as well as for the club funds as well. But the raffle at Barford, all of the money will be split between our 2 club charities this year. Now, we've also heard from Martin, G7UGB, and he says, I don't know if this is any use for people, but Lidl have got this in their fishing section this week. It's a brilliant bag that would be great for radio gear for people going mobile this summer with perhaps a QRP rig. And it comes with a good shoulder strap and plenty of pockets. Size is about 400 by 250 by 300 millimeters, and another plus is that it includes all those storage boxes, the 6 storage boxes on the right, the large ones, and 2 small ones, which are great for components in the workshop. So all of that comes in at $24.99, available from all good Lidl stores, I guess.
I didn't realise the boxes came with it.
Yeah, that's what that's the thing. So it's really very nice. Thank you very much, Martin. I'm sure there'll be a lot of radio amateurs in this area now going to their nearest Lidl store and snapping one of those up, because I mean we paid more than that just for a camera bag.
Yeah.
A lot more than that, didn't we, recently? Looks like that, so it does look very good. Thank you very much for letting us know, Martin. Thanks. I mean, any news like that at all, we'd love to see it, as you can see. Anyway, Tammy, over to you for little people.
Yep. Have you ever wondered what the true purpose of an Oreo is?
Eat? You're going to start talking about eating. We haven't had a meal yet, have we? Oh, is that it? So it's a record player.
It is.
And the cat. Couldn't leave the cat out.
Well, the cat's eaten all the cream.
The leftovers. That's lovely, isn't it? There we are. Miniature-calendar.com. A new picture every day, and Tammy picks one out for us every week. Where do they get all the ideas from? You imagine we've been doing this over 3 years now.
They've been doing it like 10 years almost or something.
And every day, isn't there the one?
Yeah.
So we've only seen a fraction of really what they've done. Anyway, thank you very much for sharing that with us. So as I said, do keep in touch with what you've been doing. We really do love to hear from you with the news and pictures. And as you can see, just even shopping tips and things like that. Very, very useful stuff. Must just give a shout out to somebody who's put a mention on watching us on Facebook at the moment. It's David M0BQC. Says, good evening, Tammy and David. I'm on holiday in Blakeney, so pleased to be back in Norfolk, where I lived until 1968. So lovely to hear from you, David. I don't know how you found us up there. They're not got one of those big screens, I don't think, have they? No, I don't think so. Anyway, lovely. Thanks very much for getting in touch, David. Okay, so now on to that competition which we run every week, and we asked 2 weeks ago, what on earth is this? Now, sometimes we get lots of entries. Sometimes we don't get many entries. But this week, we've got quite a lot of entries, 14, I think. And what's very different is that many of them are different. And I'm not going to tell you which ones might be right or wrong, if any. But they're all very different. So, Tammy, kick us off with the first guess at what that is.
Okay, Tom G8XQD. You've shown the inner working of a precision tuning vernier geared dial control knob used for fine tuning an analog radio or signal generator frequency.
But Richard G0VCW says he was a little puzzled by this one at first because his wife reckons it's part of a bobbin assembly from a sewing machine. Really? However, as always, not seeing a scale makes it harder to identify, but it looks to me like a centrifugal clutch. I have fitted similar looking ones to this on automatic mopeds and also replaced similar on my chainsaws. I hope I'm near the mark.
Chris G3XVL, the mystery picture looks to me like a cycle bell viewed from the underside.
Steve G0KY says it looks like the clutch mechanism on the front of a car's aircon compressor. I only know this as my car needs a new one as it's leaking. Oh, bad. Aircon not working in this way. Wow.
Bruce G4KZT, I think this is a slow motion dial mechanism.
Richard G7TIN says it's an old school pencil sharpener. There you go, something different.
Dave G0ELJ, this looks like a slow motion planetary dial drive.
Nev M0NFY says this looks like it could be the gearbox from an adjustable torque drill or screwdriver.
Nick M0HGU, I reckon it's a slow motion drive viewed from the back.
Bob GSDU, this week's object looks like a model flywheel clutch, maybe from a car or helicopter.
Steve M0YRU and Marie M7YRU, we think that it could be the inside of a bicycle bell.
And Steve G3VA says the mystery object looks like a bell of some kind, maybe a bicycle bell or a timer. And Mike GAEY says the object looks very much like a two-speed reduction drive from the 1960s. It works on the principle of an epicyclic arrangement of friction discs instead of gears. The 3 slots are used for mounting the unit. The planetary unit with 3 double discs engages with the outer ring and a smaller sun ring attached to the input shaft, which isn't seen. The planetary unit drives the output shaft, which you can see, and moves the pointer. A large knob is also attached to the planetary unit and gives fast direct movement to the output. A smaller knob, which isn't seen, is attached to the input shaft, allowing slow motion movement to the output shaft. Did you follow that, Tammy?
I actually didn't know.
Shall you let them into a little secret what you did just before that, please?
Well, I pointed at you to make sure you read that rather than me.
Tammy wanted me to do that one. Okay. Anyway, I wonder which one of those it could be. Is it, we've had a pencil sharpener, a bell, a model flywheel clutch, an aircon compressor. Anyway.
Somebody's right.
Put us out of our misery. What on earth was that?
It was A vernier turning dial from around 1950.
Tuning, I think.
Oh, tuning, sorry.
Tuning dial,
Tuning.
yeah. From around 1950. And Martin G7UBG sent us that. His son is something to do with a museum which actually stores these sort of things. It's a bit more obvious from the front because you'd say that was a control knob, but on the back, I could see all of those things.
The bicycle bell, I thought
Absolutely.
it was actually a really good idea.
Yeah, and also I thought a pencil sharpener with that big shaft in the middle, it could have been. But anyway, that's what it is, guys. Thank you very much for entering. And it's been a really good one. As I said, I've never seen, I think in all the 3 years we've been doing this, such diverse entries. Now, we would like as well, by the way, any more items. We're starting to run out again. So if you've got an unusual item around your house, please let us know. Before we meet tonight's guest, I'm just going to tell you what's happening.
Hang on,
I'm sorry. I should read my own script, shouldn't I? Right.
What on earth is this?
Go ahead. Make my day. Do you know what this is? I'm not going to make any more bets, though. It cost me a fortune, the last one. £9.80 to be precise. What on earth is this? I can see our guest in the corner of our monitor here looking at this as well, so I might ask him if he's got any idea. Do you have any idea what that is? You've got 2 weeks to decide and let us know by 3 o'clock on Wednesday week what on earth that is. Lauren's shaking his head. Anyway, just before we meet Loren, let's just let you know what's happening on NARC in the club in this coming week. On Sunday, we have the GB2RS News on GB3MB at 7 o'clock. On 7:30 on Monday night, we've got our Monday Night Net on GB3MB, and at 8 o'clock, the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then a week's time, on Wednesday, the 28th of June, we've got a meeting at the CNS, which is a social, and also it's a Raspberry Pi Jam, one of those things we do every month for people into their Raspberry Pis, which will tie in very nicely, by the way, to tonight's guest and what he'll be talking about. And then, of course, we'll be back here for NARC Live in 2 weeks' time when we've got a talk on how do I know where I have propagation. That's in 2 weeks' time.
We did actually miss an entry, I'm afraid.
Oh, did we? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
John, G8VPE, said, I think it is an...
epicyclic
planetary reduction drive.
Sorry, John, didn't see that entered there. But anyway, if you want to be sure of it, drop us an email and that'll be it. I just want to read something as well because I've just noticed another note regarding our dear friend Chris G4CCX, who's passed away. His good friend Richard Neal has said a big thank you, David, and to all the nurses that looked after Chris. Rest in peace. I'll miss you, mate. And there goes lots of other people. We'll say the same thing. Richard was the person that I met at the hospital when I went to see Chris last Friday afternoon. So, as I said, I will let you know as soon as we know the arrangements so that we can celebrate Chris's life. So, just finally, do please keep in touch. Let us know what your news is. Send us some pictures and things like that, and also some what on earth would be great. And also, of course, we've got this card which we're happy to send. There we go, that camera, which we're happy to send to anybody who you feel will be cheered by a card from Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. Just drop us an email with their name and address, and we'll add your name to ours and send them to us. radio@dcpmicro.com. Now, as I mentioned, next Wednesday indeed is a Raspberry Pi evening, and Raspberry Pi is just one of a series of single board computers that hobbyists can buy. There's lots of others as well. But by good, pleasant coincidence, our guest tonight is going to talk about applications to run on the Raspberry Pi, one in particular, and other single board computers as well. So it's lovely to meet Loren KE0HZ. Hello, Loren.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm quite active in my club, and I'm really interested to see how other clubs do it, and been very impressed with the way that and the frequency at which you guys have activities.
Yeah, it's nice that we're getting back to more normal things, Loren. Like everybody, I think, in the world, we haven't been able to do much the last few years, but we're certainly, I think, this year back to a sort of pretty normal schedule, really. So it's good. And one of the things we did start this year, because there was a lot of interest in it, was a Raspberry Pi Jam, which I'm sure you'll know about as someone who uses single board computers. And I know that that's one of the applications that you'll be talking to us about tonight. So as usual, before we go to Loren for his talk, you can ask questions and make comments at any time for Loren, and we'll be reading them to him at the end. So now, Loren, over to you, and we look forward to this talk very much on applications for single board computers.
Thanks very much, David. So just briefly, I've never been to Norfolk, but I am very familiar. I've driven tens of thousands of miles around England, and I spent many a weekend while I was traveling for business with a friend of mine that lived just south of you in Suffolk, in the village of Long Melford, about 10 miles south of Bury St. Edmunds. So I'm quite familiar with that area,
Yeah.
and just very pleased to get an opportunity to do that. I'm not quite sure how Roger, G3LDI, found me, but several years ago, I presented along with another member of our club, talk about shacking a pie using HamPi, and then another application that I'll mention here in a little bit as I get into the presentation. But it was a couple of years ago, and so I had at least the basis of the presentation I'm doing now. But things have changed over the past several years, as I'll note. So we'll be talking about Raspberry Pi, HamPi, and another single board computer here that over the past few years, Raspberry Pis have been very difficult to come. And then I'm really pleased to know that you've got the get-togethers of working with single board computers. I've been trying to encourage our club to do more of that as well. So, who is KE0HZ? I was first licensed almost exactly 54 years ago. It was mid-year between my 10th and 11th grades in high school. I got a general class just prior to going off to university, and then a couple of years later, an advanced class license, where I was attending North Dakota State University, getting an electrical engineering degree. And then sadly, life happens and kids happen and lots of activities. And I was inactive for 30 years, from 1988 to 2018. And actually, mistakenly, I hadn't intended to, but my license expired and I had to relicense, take the exams. And I relicensed in March or April of 2018 as an extra class. And I currently hold a similar position to Roger, where in the Tri-Lakes Monument Radio Association, W0TLM, I'm the education director, and I'm the guy responsible for arranging for presentations for the club, and have been doing that for close to 3 years now. It's a tough job, and with the frequency that Roger was putting together speakers, I commend his effort to do this. Just real briefly, here's a quick picture of my operating station in the back corner of my basement, and then a view of the house. I'm actually standing in a northeast direction, which would be the direction I would point an antenna if I were trying to communicate with somebody in your part of the world. And I'm so excited because for the first time as a ham, I've had a steerable antenna that has some gain on it for HF frequencies. And I managed to get, it took about 6 months, but I got permission from the Planning and Zoning Commission in the city of Colorado Springs to put up an antenna tower of 40 feet in height. So what you're seeing in the background are two very famous mountains that are behind the foothills or just off to the side of the screen. Pikes Peak, which is probably the most famous mountain in the lower 48 of the U.S., and Cheyenne Mountain, which is the headquarters of NORAD, that's inside the mountain, is just off to the left in the upper left of that scene. But while I live at about 7,000 feet above sea level, the peaks to the west are about 9,000 feet, and then there's 14,000 foot mountains behind those. And then just behind me going up the slope, I'm still standing on my property when I took this picture, but it's another 80 feet to the top of the peak. And It isn't too bad operating for HF, but VHF, UHF, I have a very, very small area of the circumference of a circle that I can actually operate and see repeaters or other stations with. So it's a great place to live. And I pardon my, please pardon my voice. The picture there is extremely green, much greener than it typically is, but we've had our total allocation of moisture in by the middle of June this year. It's been extremely wet, and the plants are growing profusely, and my nose and throat are suffering for it. So why am I here? Well, let's talk about HamPi, an alternative to the Raspberry Pi and some other ham-related applications. And rather than an in-depth how-to, this is just a broad brush talk. I hope to stimulate some interest to try some new things. And what I've done is I've taken the applications that are available in HamPi and tried to present them in a way that is useful for everyday operating. There's a lot of stuff available, and I'll show you some examples. And just a caveat, note that the opinions here expressed are just one ham's thoughts. Your own mileage may vary on the use of some of these, and there's probably something I don't cover that could be of great interest, but try and give you a good flavor of what's available. So what is HamPi? So HamPi is an image running that creates a small computer service to use in your shack or take into the field. Two hardware options for it, the Raspberry Pi or the Innovata Quadra, which is a product that came out probably about a year and a half ago, I think, just simply because we could not find Raspberry Pis for retail, and those that were capable of buying them were marking them up. So it was just, they were priced quite ridiculously, actually. Wide variety of applications to computerize your ham shack. You can operate it remotely via VNC, Virtual Node Controller, I believe it stands for. It has hotspot capability, and as I mentioned, inexpensive, but supply chain issues affected that, obviously. But I heard from David a couple of weeks ago that you guys had an opportunity to buy directly from the source in Cambridge. So, good for you. We didn't have that ability. So thankfully I had a stock. I've got about 5 or 6. Some of them are older, but still very functional in my supply. And I'm running a couple of them all the time here. Continuing, downloadable software image preloaded with those applications. It's based on the Raspbian Buster desktop. It recommended for a Pi 3 or 4, but it can run on a Pi 2, but application, some of them will suffer. Performance isn't quite good enough for perhaps the SDRs to run effectively. Simple configuration, and there is plenty of YouTube help available. So what's needed? SD card, 16 gigabyte or larger, 32 recommended. Power source, the Pi 3s require one with a micro USB, or the Pi 4s a USB 3.0. And care must be taken that you have something that will supply at least 2.5 amps. Otherwise, you will get a pretty continuous warning that it's suffering from low voltage, and some things may run. It may shut down and reboot. So you need a good power supply. Wi-Fi internal or Ethernet connection, and I've got an Ethernet connection when I try a demo here in a little bit. And then optional for the audio interface from the rig, if digital, that would be a USB interface. If analog, a product like SignalLink, and for SDR, you'll need an SDR dongle of some sort. So I mentioned temporary requirements. Keyboard, mouse, and display are helpful when you first run your setup, but with PuTTY, a terminal program. You can control the Pi and command line from another computer on the network. Pi is headless in this particular case, and I've provided a link to PuTTY if you're not familiar with it or have it already. And then with VNC Viewer, you can view the Pi's desktop from any computer on your network or off the network via internet, and that's actually what I'm going to be demoing here today, and there's a link to Real VNC. So I'm operating a PC, but you can do that from another Linux box or Windows. Couple of screenshots. On the left is a PuTTY interface where you put in the host IP address and port and load that up and open it, and you get a terminal window that will control it. Now I am accessing from the Windows machine. I'm not using PuTTY to interface it because I'm not on that network and I don't have it opened up for a server that will allow outside exchange. But if you're on that network, this works quite well. VNC I would recommend, as it's a much better interface for running these applications. Oh, caveat: if you are off the net, or if you're running VNC, I do it when I'm right next to the HamPi because I don't want an extra terminal and keyboard. But it doesn't support audio. So if you're using the audio from the Raspberry Pi, you'll see from some demos here, I won't be able to provide the audio. But if you're running close by, it works nice to use the VNC, but to have either a headphone or a speaker attachment to the Raspberry Pi for that audio. And this is just a screenshot of the desktop for Raspberry Pi. I've got an application called HamClock running in the upper right, and then I've got a terminal monitoring where I'm monitoring the activity on each of the cores in the Raspberry Pi. There are 4 cores, and you can see if you're overloading it with the applications that you're running. I won't demonstrate that, but that's easily added to the Raspberry Pi at a later time. So a picture of the actual operation. There's the Raspberry Pi with the RTL SDR dongle that's connected. I have run it hooked up to the my FTDX 3000, and the screenshot in the upper right is actually decoding WSJTX and FT8 decoding using the Raspberry Pi in this case. The SDR is inactive here, but I'm connecting the CAT cable from the radio to the Raspberry Pi. I'm not required to use a signal link in this configuration. If I'm using my radio, my FT817, that's pictured above the FTDX 3000 there, I would be using a signal link for the audio connection. And as you see, I'm running the Raspberry Pi headless in this particular case. No other connections, keyboard, mouse, or monitor at this point. So how do you get it? Download HamPi. SourceForge is the appropriate place to get it, providing a link. And I will make the slides available, David, later, so they can be posted. You can also find the image on GitHub. Unfortunately, it's not current. The release for HamPi, the latest release, was in November of 2022, and as you can see on the GitHub, it was May 2022 is the last time that's been updated. GitHub is useful because it has a good list of the applications that are available, but again, it's changed and it hasn't been managed. So there's some that are not working that are listed there, and there's also a few that are not listed that are available. So basically the best way to find it is to run through the listings in the Raspberry Pi when you get it working. I use to load the image on the SD card, I use a product called Etcher. This is a free freeware software, and works very effectively for creating that image. So, HamPi applications. Here's a real brief summary, but I've kind of organized them into features and functionality. So from an operating perspective, digital modes, WSJTX, JS8 call, PSK, and its derivatives and variations of digital communications, Whisper, SDRs, a number of them are available. ADSB, which is the receiver for the aircraft transponders for tracking aircraft, HamFax, DX clusters, Echolink, WinLink, APRS, SSTV, lots of different opportunities. I do not use all of them. I've used a number of them, but there's more than I've had time to experiment with. Then there's a number of operating tools related to that satellite tracking applications. There's a DMR decoder, rig control libraries with FLRig or HamLib, Grid Tracker, which is a great accessory to use with, if you're using FT8, FT4 as an operating mode. There are shack management applications, logging, clocks, GPS tools, calculator and design tools, antenna modeling, propagation, Morse code practice, several applications to support that. So I'm going to move into a demo, but there are two important rules you need to be aware of that I've learned in my professional life over the years. Rule number one is never, ever rely on a live demo. So I've got backup slides that I can talk to in case I need them. However, if you're really confident that a live demo is going to work, just refer back to rule number one. But sometimes it's worth a try. So bear with me. There will be a little bit of fumbling around with the screens here for the time being, but David says I can do this by minimizing the screen. And if David, if you note any issues here as I start this,
no, it's fine. We've just got you on full screen now for your face, so that we won't see all the other things.
This should just take a moment. So here is my. You can go back onto the screen share now. So here is my VNC connection. I've got a HamPi computer. We're connecting, and again, as I mentioned, I run two different networks in my house, and the network that I'm currently on cannot see directly the other network. I've done that for some security purposes, and see if I remember. Oh, sorry, I was trying to talk and missed that. There we go. So we have HamPi running. This, if I went in and connected a monitor to my Raspberry Pi, this is a screen with a little bit of resolution issues associated with this. So we'll get this started. I mentioned HamClock as a useful application. So let's just restart. Oh, okay. Now what did I do? See, this is why.
It's the curse of live, isn't it? It's the curse of live, Loren.
All right, we'll try it that way. Another instance has been detected, only one. All right, I had it running here. So this is the ham clock screen. I love this screen. I find it extremely useful, but it's very annoying that it's as small as it is. But I'm going to run through a couple of things on here. Oh, just another thing. I'm not really fond of this this desktop, and thankfully there's a lot of options already preloaded that are available for it. So time, always useful. Currently set to well, let's see. Is it UTC? Is it yeah, it is.
Yeah, that is right. UTC.
That
so
is
an hour
correct.
behind
So
where we are in the UK.
Correct. So a couple of things. The DE is my location. It shows up on the map here. My grid square is DM78, and current weather 73 degrees F. What's that? About 23 degrees C. And I have the solar weather up here. Currently 151 sunspots, and I love this number. 180 is our solar flux index with a reasonable geomagnetic K number of almost 2, 1.7 in this particular case. So there's a couple of options here. I can click on a dot that is as close to an approximation of Norfolk County as I can possibly make it, showing both the short path and long path directions if I need to point an antenna to you. And we've been getting a tremendous amount of long path propagation on 17 and 15 meters here in my location. It turns out to be actually easier to talk long path to Australia and New Zealand from where I'm at than short path. So then that DX information for you here. You know what? It says UTC +0. It hasn't taken into account summertime, so that part is off. But what we can also do here is that we can use this for satellite tracking. So AO7, the HOPE-1 satellite is up. In 8 minutes, AO7 will be up. So if we need to point the antenna, it's going to be low on the horizon for me, but in the northeast direction. And here's the current satellite path, and I'll just be on the fringes of it here in a few minutes. So if you're planning to do some satellite work, this is quite useful in that case. Again, mentioned these are configurable. This just happens to be the way that I like to use it. Let's see what else. So over here in the list of the applications, if you're familiar with the Raspberry Pi Raspbian desktop, you're going to recognize a lot of these icons. But what HamPi does is it loads up a list here with the ham radio applications. So I'm going to run through a few of these that I mentioned I'm finding useful. What I didn't mention earlier is when I got my general class license 52 years ago, sadly, that was the last time I made a CW contact. I still actually know CW a little bit, but not fast enough that I wouldn't totally embarrass myself. And I always use a straight key. I never used a keyer. But here's a program, XCWCP, that you can set to a number of different things, letter groups, let's do all character groups and start it. Now, if I had the audio available, you would hear the code and it shows what's being sent. It cheats a little bit because it prints out what it's going to be sending prior to it actually sending it. So here's a group of letter groups, English words, probably a little bit easier to start your practice on listening to these types. But as I showed here just a moment ago, within Morse code. We've got 4 different applications that you can try, and I can't predict what anybody else would like, but this is pretty useful. Let's see. Next, from an operating perspective, I have used when I first got relicensed and was active again. I had a Linux computer as my my shack computer, and this was the logging program that I started using. So we'll open this up and see if we can show a few things. I won't bother to update the databases right now, but this is your standard entry for QSO. I'm going to take a look here. We do the configuration. Here are the preferences where you input your station information, QTH profiles and such. And now you can view. I imported an ADIF file from some time ago that I can show you. And let's look at the QSO list. So back in February, I was running some FT8. There are a few sideband. There's a few sideband connections that I did make at that time, but it's very easy to upload, import an ADIF file. So it's just a matter of going, and if you're transporting it from another logging program that you're using in your shack, especially if you want to take this out into the field, you can update your the logging file here, use it, then reload the ADIF when you're done after working in the field. And it's got a few other interesting things that it can show. It's got clusters available, weather information that can be shown. Maps. I enjoy working gray line propagation, so it's nice to see that on occasion. So several different logging options, as I mentioned. I have not used all of these, although TQSL, if you're utilizing Log of the World, is critical for that. So you can do that from your Raspberry Pi as well. So I want to here's where I knew yesterday that my rule number 1 was going to apply. I had my FT817 connected for demo purposes. I was going to show WSJTX FT8 decoding. However, the FT817 decided to quit turning on. It has power available to it, but the on-off switch isn't doing anything. So I just can't show you connected with that coming up here next. But one of the other really useful tools or suites is the FLDigi suite if you're operating remotely. So what you would do first is start up FLRig. Notice it's trying to connect to my FT817. Initializing here. It happens to be set to a PSK frequency. And from here, I would open up a FLDigi, and with it tuned this and running, I would hope to see some signals here in the waterfall for that and some decodes taking place. What's really interesting about FLDigi, if you haven't used it before, is there are options for just about everything. So if you see a digital signal on the waterfall that you don't recognize, trial and error. It might be an Olivia. It might be the MFSK. So lots of opportunities to try different things. I have done a little bit of RTTY decoding with this, and that's another thing that's on my list of trying out. I should point out, I am less of an operating ham and more of what I've heard referred to as a propagation ham. I like to experiment. I don't like to necessarily find an operating mode and then just do that all the time. And frankly, I use FT8 as helping me understand what the propagation, what's going on with propagation, because, you know, as with the directional antenna, it's less of an issue now, but when I was using a vertical antenna, you know, omnidirectional, it was really interesting watching when different regions of the world popped up, like gray line into South America was really good. But, you know, until we were operating in gray line, it generally wasn't very good for me previously. So that these type of tools are really good for that. Let's see. We'll shut that down and bring up weak signal and WSJTX. Notice, I don't know, it's probably too fast for you to notice, but it also has a JTX opportunity. So in configurations, or I'm sorry, in the settings here, under the radio, if you haven't set this up before, you may already know that you can set it for a particular rig, and now the cat control understands that. Or as another option is that I have used and worked, but I've been having some issues. I've been having some issues with it. Is the FL rig? Sorry, we're having some. It's. So we have the FL rig options here. And now all of the CAD interfaces are done because within FL rig, if you recall, I had it set for my FT817. So there's a number of options to go through and to get this set up. But again, for portable operations, this is a terrific application. And one of the modes that I enjoy using just to see how I'm getting out is the whisper mode, where you, let's see how far I can be heard when I crank the power down to 100 milliwatts instead of 20 or 30 that I'm operating when I'm on FT8. So good fun doing that. So a little more interesting demos here that we'll see if we can get to work. I really have enjoyed playing around with SDR radios. And I opened up an application here called SDR++. A little bit of configuration, takes a little time to sort out all the things that you can do. I have a source of the RTL SDR, but a lot of the other options here. I have an SDR Play that I've used occasionally with this, but it's more permanently hooked up to be the pan adapter for my FTDX 3000. So I'm in the 75 centimeter band, and I'm going to start. There we go. And I'm going to tune this down because I'm going to transmit and show you what we can see. So my Pi star for my DMR radio is operating at 438.575. let's put it on that. This is KE0HZ testing. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, let's see.
Sorry, that was another channel that just popped up. But what you can see is that I transmitted and the Pi-Star was transmitting back to me. So, and actually, that signal right here is another conversation that I hadn't disconnected from. So I'm receiving on this radio Pi-Star, but I'm also seeing it here on the Raspberry Pi.
Okay, I guess not. Heading
on the Raspberry Pi that is connected to my dual band J-pole, 2 meters, 75 centimeter on the roof of the house. So another option here is I can transmit to a local repeater, but as I mentioned, I've got a pile of rocks that kind of surround me, and I'm going to transmit to a
yellow elevated.
to a repeater that I actually can't reach. And the frequency of that is 447. But because I'm transmitting at a 5 megahertz offset, there's my signal that I would, when I'm keyed down. This is KE0HZ kerchunking. If I went to the actual frequency output of the repeater, we wouldn't be able to see anything. Why do I do this? I don't like setting my HT and run all day on scan. And if I just want to monitor activity in either 2 meter or 75 centimeter repeater bands, is I can actually just watch for activity on the screen here, on the waterfall, on the chart. That way I'm not tuning. If it looks like there's some activity, I might tune to it at that point in time. So that's how I prefer to, that's how I use SDRs in this particular case. Let me show you another one of the SDRs. And that would be the GQRX. Again, another open source application. And I have this currently tuned to, and we'll start it, tuned into the aircraft VHF band. So at 224, or I'm sorry, at 125, this is the local ATIS, which is an information channel that aircraft will monitor. What you're seeing here are some of the tower or approach or departure frequencies that are popping up. And it's kind of fun to listen into them. I would imagine in your location, you would be hearing a good bit of aircraft arrival communications if you've ever been listening to those. So if you don't have a radio that will tune into those aircraft bands, listen to it on SDR. So let's see here. One thing I was going to mention, when I was fooling around to build a kind of a script for things to show, I opened up one of the SDRs and it just cranked and cranked and cranked. It wouldn't open up, but it was a resource issue. So in my case, I've been shutting down the applications after I've stopped using them because the SDRs are pretty processing intensive. For those of you who have fooled around with SDRs and like doing that, but you've ever wondered on how they ever work behind the scenes, there's an application called GNU Radio Companion. And I have had a lot of fun fooling around with this. So what we're looking at is a flow that I created. I won't take credit for knowing exactly how to do this, but there were some examples, and then I have fine-tuned it to do some demonstration stuff. And I gave an SDR presentation to our club and was using this for that. These over here are modules. So here is a frequency translating FFT filter. Well, I don't need this right now, but if it were something that I needed to connect it to it, I would double click on this, and now I would set things like sample rate and decimation, which is reducing the amount of data that's flowing in the digital stream, just to simplify things. And you can do that. You can reduce the amount of data that's flowing through the system so that it will perform better without necessarily losing fidelity of that signal. So I'll walk you through this particular one. Here is the RTL that we've been using with the previous SDRs. It provides an output. I've brought it into a low-pass filter. I am interested in a band from the carrier frequency for a 100 kilohertz. This is, in essence, 100 kilohertz frequency deviation in that signal. I flow that into a wideband FM receive module. I flow that into a resampler, which cuts out an awful lot of the bits because we don't need them. And if you remember, if any of you have studied some digital in the past, you may remember there is a rule that says if you want to reproduce the frequency of a particular signal, you need to sample at least twice that frequency rate. If you do that, now sampling more, faster, again, more fidelity, but you can create a reproduction of that signal by only sampling at twice the maximum frequency of the signal you're trying to do. I put in a multiplying construct, and I'm using this for volume control, and then this is actually the audio amplifier that would be playing. Now, within each of these modules, you can provide variables, changing variables for the options that are required for a particular block. So in this case, I've selected two frequencies, 98.1 megahertz and 91.5 megahertz. You'll see how that works in a moment. I've got a sample, over here, I changed this bandpass from 100K down to 10K. I have a volume range, which is a slider. And if I start to run this, click execute, you'll see some activity down here of the codes getting loaded and beginning to run. And up comes the receiver that I've built here. So I'm looking at, here is that passband of 100 kilohertz. Here's a waterfall. From the looks of it, this station is probably playing music. This is probably a station probably fairly similar to Radio 2 over in your area. I'll change. Here was one of the selectors. My chooser over here. Here's the 91.5. This is talk radio. There's a good bit of talk radio. This is like your Radio 4. And you can see the difference in the waterfall. So back to here, the reason I show this is if you're building a receiver for a particular function, and in one case, let's say that you're doing narrowband FM at 25 kilohertz, which is what you would be doing with an analog 2-meter signal into a repeater. But if you're operating DMR on that channel, you're probably at 12.5 kilohertz. So I can click this on and watch there. Look what has happened to that signal in that passband. And we're minus 20, minus 80. So this is about a 60 dB filter for that signal. And again, tuning to tune out interference, narrowing up the bandpass. Now you can actually visually see what's happening. So we'll put it back here. So the idea is, I want to mention all of the other SDRs that are available will support receive only. GNU Radio, I could build a receiver and a transmitter into here if I had the appropriate hardware. So I can generate that FM signal, that an open source digital radio signal, for example, in GNU Radio, and then pass that into a transmitter. And now I can do full transmit and receive if I have that appropriate hardware. So kind of cool. Even better yet, this is a really, really neat option. So I'm going to shut down. Oh, before I do that, this radio is actually blocks of Python code. And I click run. If I hit generate instead, I've already done this, but I'll show you what the results are. Let's get rid of this. Open up my documents. That generate code created this file, FM Advanced. Here, I'm going to double click it and open it. And so those modules resulted in about exactly 342 lines of code. So let's kill that, but let's try something different. Let's execute this code. Note the .py. This is Python code that is now going to run on the Raspberry Pi. And there's the radio that I was showing you when we were running it off of the actual flow. So those of you that want to get in, kind of peel back the onion on an SDR, this can occupy hours of your time if you're so inclined. So it's important that you're that you have these options, so that if you want to use HamPi in your shack for a lot of different things, you can view using open source applications. You can view PowerPoints, Excel spreadsheets, create the equivalent of Word documents with it, manage files like it. One application that I have been very interested in of late isn't directly available in Node-RED, but it isn't too hard to load Node-RED into this system. So I'm going to open up a terminal window, and I'm going to start Node-RED. Oh, I also noticed that you had Kyle, I think KE0HZ, speak to you in the not too distant past.
That's right.
This will be nothing like his demo, but just again showing what you can do if you choose to play around with the Raspberry Pi. So I've started Node-RED as a service running in the unit. I'm going to open up a web browser. I'm going to type localhost :1880, enter. And if you attended the Node-RED presentation, you might recognize this, or the equivalent of this, where you create flows. So what I did is I borrowed, or basically downloaded a flow off of groups.io site for Node-RED, and I've modified it. I had to modify it for the particular serial connection that I'm using. So this is a USB connection. You know, I'm in the debug mode here, and you notice that it is actually sending out a message payload. Truth in advertising, I don't have this fully working, but it's communicating with my refurbished HAM4 rotor controller in my shack. So created this mode, created a number of dashboard related items for the flow, and now I'm going to open up the display that gets created for this, and that is localhost 1880 with a user interface. And now here is my rotor controller, and if I want, I'm pointing simulated. It's working to send correction. It actually is not reporting back. I think I've narrowed it down. It's not in the Node-RED because the same thing happens when I run Node-RED in my Windows PC, is that I'm not getting the feedback serial string from the rotor controller to tell me where it's actually pointing. But if I want to shift this around to talk to Brazil from the UK, I hit that. Now it turns the rotor. So, but it doesn't change this. But I'm doing that when I'm operating the shack, so I can at least look at the pointer on my rotor controller. Let's see. That's about all I wanted to talk about this. So again, Node-RED is not available. That would have to be in the HamPi image. That's something that would have to be brought up later. So David, I'm going to leave this and for a bit here, and I'm going to open up my.
Can I just ask you? But I said I wasn't going to interrupt you, but with something that's just pertinent to this point, the Node-RED that you were running there, were you running that from within the HamPi, or was that? So you can do that. You can run both.
Yes, you can. Okay. And that's what I was hoping I alluded to that. But this is something now where you bring up a Windows terminal, or sorry, not Windows terminal, a terminal, and use command line to load the applications. Good news is there is lots of online help for this. The groups.io people, and Kyle's very active in that. There's a number of hams. There's a huge amount of activity for certain rigs. Elecraft and now I'm having a senior moment and the name is escaping me, but there are lots of dashboards that have been created that basically do the radio control, and very extensive, much more complicated than what I've just showed you, but it can all run on the HamPi server, so no issue with that.
Lovely, thank you. Just thanks for
one of the notes. One of the items that I did hear, Kyle, I wanted, because I'd seen that his presentation before he'd given it to our club. I went to the end and I was curious about questions that were getting asked. And I think he said that, I think one of the pieces of advice that he gives is that for an application like that, that's going to run all the time, have a dedicated server for it. But for a simple application, not too complicated like the rotor controller, not a problem at all for it.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for clearing that up.
So there is code that is available like Node-RED for ADS-B aircraft tracking. I don't have that running on my, this one's different. This is not running on my Raspberry Pi that is running HamPi. I have a dedicated server for it. But the code exists. I will caution you that code was written a long time ago, and I'm not sure how current it actually is, but it's called 1090 dump. So 1090 is the 1090 megahertz is the frequency for the ADS-B transponders. But currently, this is my ADS-B receiver, and I'm currently tracking 69 aircraft. And I mentioned a little bit about where my propagation is. Well, I'm here, and look at all the aircraft to the southeast. If you can actually see that on the screen. Anything to the east around to the southwest, I can't get anything further than 100 miles out. But I can actually track aircraft. I was a little bit earlier today. The furthest one out now is 236.7 nautical miles. I was tracking an aircraft at 275 nautical miles. Now, I can't imagine how many aircraft you would have in the terrain that you live in, as close to Heathrow, Gatwick, Luton, Stansted, City Airport, probably Manchester, and it would be crazy the number of aircraft that you can track. And it keeps track of statistics. I typically average about 2,100 aircraft per day, and 250,000-ish reports per day. I am uploading. I'm a feeder to FlightAware, and one of the nice benefits of doing FlightAware is that you get essentially a commercial account, and you can get a lot more information about aircraft. And I use it all the time when I've been traveling over the years. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and skip ahead here a good bit. So as I said, I've got screenshots of pretty much everything I covered here in the talk. Here's the information about the ADS-B decoder, and I've got the GitHub dump 1090 link if that's something. And you could probably easily run this on the HamPi with the other stuff. I don't think it's hugely resource intensive. What I didn't cover, because I don't currently use it, I have done WinLink in the past, but I don't have anything running right now. But there are a bunch of WinLink related applications that are available. Pat WinLink, specifically for the Raspberry Pi, RDOP, the AX25 COM protocol, and then APRS applications. I've not ever done APRS, but they are available if interested in experimenting. So I mentioned briefly earlier some alternative hardware and software. This was the device that I mentioned, Innovata Quadra, that was developed to provide Raspberry Pi-like capabilities, and I've not used it, but it's relatively inexpensive. I think what would that about $39 US, with that, about a little over 30 quid in your currency. So, but understanding you probably don't need to do that. So the other thing, when I first gave the HamPi presentation, I did it with also did it with a guy who did Build-A-Pi, which is not a server. Well, it creates a server for yourself, but it doesn't come as an image. It requires you loading Raspbian initially. And instead of providing that image, Jason Olam, KE0HZ, has provided a script that loads all of the applications that you may want. Jason has a really interesting history. He about 10, 12 years ago, his town was devastated by a tornado. And they were without communications for the better part of a week. So ham radio operators did show up. He saw what they did, and he said, I'm going to get my license, and I'm never going to be as ill-prepared as I was previously. And that was the impetus for creating Build-A-Pi, was for emergency comms when needed. It was designed primarily for use in the field and, again, focus on emergency comms. I mentioned not a pre-built image. List of applications available for Build-A-Pi are found on the GitHub page I've referenced. And then there is a new version of it that they're calling 73 Linux, which is the next generation of Build-A-Pi. But it's still, I would still call it probably beta. I have built a Build-A-Pi server and really like it. And Jason's a great guy. I interviewed him for one of our club meetings a couple of years ago, and I'd highly recommend you might reach out to him because just has a good story to tell. Another thing that I really like about it is his YouTube channel is extensive, and he reports on successes and failures. So in many cases, there's been some issues, maybe an out-of-date app, so his script is failing, but a huge user community that's helping with troubleshooting of this. Very easy to install. In fact, there in red is the command that initiates the script. So the script is actually resident on GitHub, and this goes and retrieves it and builds it. Another cool feature is you actually get to choose what you want to install. So you can, think in advance about, how do I want to use this? And then select the appropriate applications, and you end up with a very lean machine running that application for you later. And you don't need to be a Linux expert to actually do this. So again, one ham's opinion here, final observations, your mileage may vary. HamPi has just a tremendous number of applications allowing you to try and experiment a wide variety. In general, HamPi is easier to get started with because it's just simply, let's open up the image and do a little bit of local configuration. It does contain some bloatware, stuff that you don't need. I don't need to go into it. It's self-explanatory if you run it, but there are things that you can do to get rid of that or not utilize it. And then compared to Build-A-Pi, which I haven't given a whole lot of background on it, but it's not so dissimilar from what we've been talking about other than the very specific operating capabilities. Greater hardware and software flexibility. It's tailorable to your needs. I think it's better suited because it's more focused on the portable operation aspect, and it certainly has better online support than HamPi. I'm not dissing HamPi, but again, from my perspective, HamPi is fun to play with. There are applications that really do indeed help me operate. But if I were going to do this for portable, I would definitely be utilizing Build-A-Pi instead. And then mentioned before, for some very, very specific applications like Node-RED that I want on all the time, I would use Node-RED, but I might also have HamClock running and maybe one or two other apps that are useful in my shack. And the ADS-B application for tracking the aircraft, I actually have the Raspberry Pi up in the attic of my house with just a little home-built antenna that I used an bulkhead SO239 to attach some radials to, and then obviously at that frequency you don't want to be pushing the signal through lossy coax any great distance. I have the Raspberry Pi running headless up in the attic as well. So I'm all in favor of at the cost point to run these as dedicated servers. I've got a list here of a number of groups.io links and the GitHub link for the HamPi, as well as probably noted them back in the slide presentation. And that's all I've got. Questions? Happy to get questions, and we'll do my best.
When you say that's all you've got, that's quite a lot, really. As you alluded to, we have seen some of these products or some of the things like the Pi before, because obviously we've got our workshops, the Raspberry Pi Jams that are working on that. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my microphone here. It never happens, but just a little problem then. So we're familiar, some of us are fairly familiar now with the Raspberry Pi, and this is obviously a great application for it. Although I've never heard of the Innovato Quadra. I don't think that was a thing over here. And by the way, the Pi is still a big shortage in this country. It's just that for one-offs, and because Norfolk is quite close to Cambridge, as you'll remember from your travel, you can go to the shop in Cambridge. There is a Raspberry Pi shop in the main arcade there, and you can buy most things as a one-off. You can't go in there and buy lots because they're well aware of what people have been doing. It's just for information for everybody at home. Anyway, so the HamPi itself, it seemed, if you've got, by the way, I should plug it again here, if you've got a question or a comment, or if you've run this at home, then please get in touch now, and we'll give those questions and pass on your comments to Loren.
Yeah, so a question for me, David. How many members do you have online currently?
Well, we have, in total, we have 230 members. Of which we typically get 40 or 50 watching this live. But there'll be quite a few people, I think, as we also record this now. During COVID, I must say that a lot of people, we had a lot more people watching it live. Now we do get quite a few people, being the summer and everything, and they watch the recording, which we upload to YouTube in a couple of days. So I'm not really sure exactly how many people are watching now. But certainly got a few questions and things for you.
Good.
The HamPi, I mean, to me, and I'm on this Raspberry Pi Jam as well, and it just seems more like almost a complete operating system, like a complete shell, like a converting and adapting your Raspberry Pi for ham use. Is that a fair assessment of it?
The Build-A-Pi certainly is that. HamPi itself, you can do that just recognizing you've got all that other stuff that's sitting there as well. It could be removed, but I think that would be, kind of a headache to do it. But, it being there is probably not taking up resources. So you definitely can configure this. And in fact, I have configured the HamPi in recent weeks to do the antenna rotor control, to provide me with the clock. If you recall that the VOCAP, which I didn't mention specifically, but VOCAP is a propagation predictor, and all I have to do is click on a region in the map, and it gives me a red, yellow, green, color-coded, what is the probability on a particular band at a particular time of 90+% for rad communications. And 20 meters was probably open. We're probably just past the window of where it shows that it's good propagation from my house to your locale. But if I clicked on Brazil, for example, it's going to be show a great opportunity to chat with them at a wide range of times and a wide range of frequencies. So long answer to the question is, yeah, you can absolutely configure it to operate for your needs. And now we're talking about low power in the usage, and you don't feel so bad about letting it run all day.
No, sure, and it's a great efficient. I mean, obviously a relatively low cost. The basic model's around about £50. I guess $60, $65 it should be for you. By the way, I should mention as well, when I went to the Raspberry Pi shop for some of our people who are on our course, and I mentioned about the shortage, and they said that things should get better over the summer now. So heading into the autumn, there should be a bit more of a free supply, hopefully.
We've gotten word, and there's been a lot of chatter on lines in some of the groups that I monitor about, it's available. They've got 10 in stock, and then somebody complains that said, yeah, but they were gone 2 minutes later, and so there's a lot of pent up demand from the past few years.
Yeah, and that has been the same here, as I said. You mentioned the Innovato Quadra. Are there any other micros? One that's quite popular over here with DIY electronics makers and things is the Arduino, which isn't as powerful as a Pi. Is there any other micro that we should be aware of, single board controller?
So the Arduino is great for single function kinds of activities. In fact, I have done a bunch of Node-RED work with Arduinos and using an Arduino that has built-in Wi-Fi and communicating it back to a Node-RED server in the past. But running the applications that require some processing, I mean, it's not practical at all for a SDR, for example, or decoding FT8 signals. I think so for someone who is comfortable utilizing a single board computer without a tremendous amount of online help, I think there's just a whole bunch of options. And if you just Google single board computers, a whole host of them will come up. I believe the HamPi requires something that will that you can, it took some development for HamPi to actually run on some of these other computers. I think it would load. I think you'd be able to put that image on those single board computers, but there's a number of things that require the audio interface, the CAD interface, just some other things that need to be tuned up for a particular piece of hardware. And that's where you might run into some issues, but they're fixable, but I don't think that's for the faint of heart.
No, sure. Well, thanks for that advice. Phil, G6AIO, has sent us a message and says there's been another update to HamPi on SourceForge in March 2023. He wonders if you know.
That's the one. Yes,
okay, that's the one.
That is the one on SourceForge. It was the one on GitHub that was from. I take that back. You're right. There was a March update. Apologies. Okay. I've been working on this presentation since last summer when Roger first contacted me, and my October didn't work out, and I had to delay it. So in the course of updating it over the months, I probably missed that. So a good point, Phil. Appreciate you pointing that out.
That's
what I'll probably do is I'll probably go back in and update that, so it's the link. Make sure that it's getting the latest one before I send it to you for publishing, David.
I was going to say that would be really good if you can send me some of those links and things that we can put in our newsletter for people that catch up with this as well. I mean, you mentioned what you've done professionally. Do you mind me asking what you did professionally?
Not at all. I worked for a number of years for the only company in the world, or the only company in the US that was designing GSM radio hardware. And I did business development work. I managed market development in Europe, and was using the UK as a base of operations. Spent a lot of time out in Newbury with Vodafone. I was in Basingstoke for certification testing for the radio modules. So I was traveling all over the world, talking with integrators and distributors for these little postage stamp size GSM, GPRS, 2G, 2.5G, 3G back in the day. And in the course of that, I never lived in Europe, but I was traveling over for 2-week periods about every 5 weeks. So I was spending a good bit of time there. But I got acquainted with all of the network operators because they required different certifications or internal testing, and worked with distributors for those products. And these the devices were getting used in vehicle tracking, which was probably the first really big application for these. Security, point of sale terminals, electric meters. So that was my occasion to talk with just about any and every integrator in England that I could find.
And it's good to see the. Of course, you would have come across the ARM chip many times, and it's good to see that they're doing well as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. The M2M, machine to machine, back before it was called Internet of Things. ARM has done wonderfully, with those type of applications.
Yeah. We're getting towards the end of our time here. I've had a message from a friend actually, who just says about your FT817, which wouldn't power up, I think you said today. He says, have you actually removed the battery pack? Because that will allow you to do a full, complete hard reset. He found that he had a similar problem when he plugged in a mains unit, but it had a battery pack inside, and that stopped the whole thing powering down.
I have a separate battery pack for that is not connected, but that's really good advice. To be honest with you, I've never really looked, so I'll check that out.
It might be worth it because there is space for internal batteries, so if there are some in there. That's what he says.
Really appreciate that tip.
Okay. Well, look, many, many thanks, Loren. You've really given us some really good stuff to do with our Raspberry Pi. Speaking to Jeff, who runs our Raspberry Pi Jams, and he'll be doing another one again next Wednesday when we meet at the CNS school. And, he's I think, soon going to be asking people to sort of create their own things. Up to now, he's been telling us what to do each session. But now we're going to have, be able to go off on our own and find things. And I think that the HamPi is obviously going to be a real top of the list for many people. And we're really grateful for you spending the time tonight to not just to tell us about it, but actually show us how to use it, because that really helps a lot. So thank you very much indeed for tonight.
No, you're very, very welcome. Will you be streaming those sessions, or are those
no, they're not. No, because they need to be more or less in person. So they're just, in fact, the gentleman who offered to run it for us, our member who runs, Jeff, he said at first, I'd like to do this. He'd done it with a previous employer, and he offered to do it. And he said, do you think there'd be a lot of interest here? Because I've been trying to get the club back to normal things and doing a few in-person things. Whilst we do talks like this online, it's good to meet and interact with people socially. So we were talking about it, and he offered to do this, and we thought I said that you might get 5 or 6 people interested, and we actually have a group of 18, which is a big group to deal with and larger than he would have liked, really. And we had to sort of put the stops on that. So we have a lot of people, and we meet once a month at the moment. So gradually we're finding our way how to use the Pi, which for a lot of us, unless we were in a previous life, sort of BBC micro programmers or DOS programmers or something like that, the command line interface is a strange thing that most of us have grown out of now with Windows type operating systems on Windows and Macs and things. So he's been teaching us how to basically get our hands on a Raspberry Pi and how to start with it. But I know that very, very soon he's going to be asking us to have our own applications and start going in our own way. And this strikes me, this HamPi is a great place to start. And in fact, I'm going to post, once we've been recording tonight, although we've been doing this live, and with your permission, we'll upload this onto YouTube, and then we'll link it to the Raspberry Pi group so that people who've missed it will be able to watch it, because I'm sure it'll be very relevant.
Yeah, very good. And in fact, I wouldn't mind reaching out to, if you want, could share me with contact information with your jam organizer. I would really like to see our club do a similar thing, and it'd be fun to chat and see how
Sure.
that got set up. And then just one quick idea that came up from what you just mentioned is that GNU Radio Python code would be, if you want to create your own application, that would probably be where I would go with it initially.
Great. Okay. Well, what I'll do is we have a groups IO as well, which is not public as such, but I'll get you an invitation for that, and then you can join that group and you see the sort of thing we do.
Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much for tonight, Loren. It really has been inspirational and something really useful to do with Raspberry Pis. When we started doing our jams, we realised and we asked, and lots of people had Raspberry Pi sitting in the bottom of a drawer, never really finding an application. And it strikes me that what you've told us about tonight is a really good application. So thanks once again.
Well, inspirational isn't the adjective I would have thought of, but I was hoping that could stimulate a little bit of interest. So thanks for having me, and wish all of you the best.
Many, many thanks. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. And there we are. That's it from Loren KE0HZ. Thanks once again to him. That's almost it for NARC Live this week. Just to remind you again what's coming up at the club in the next few days. On Sunday we've got the GB2RS news at 7 o'clock on GB3MB. On Monday at 7:30 also on GB3MB we have our Monday Night Net. And at 8 o'clock the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then 1 week today, as I've mentioned several times tonight, we've got our Raspberry Pi Jam at the CNS school, and also a social for anybody who's not involved with the Raspberry Pi Jam. And then of course we're back here in 2 weeks' time for NARC Live. And don't forget to keep sending us your stories, your updates, your pictures. We'd love to see them, and we'll bring them to you on the next NARC Live. But until then, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7URP, take care of yourselves, look after each other. Bye-bye.